Imagine this, you wake up to the same suffocating dawn, the same metallic tang in the air, the same eerie silence in your neighborhood. Only this isn't the first time. It's December 2, 1984, Bhopal, India. The city stirs under a thick, foreboding fog, but tonight isn't just another day, it's the night history broke. Welcome to Midnight What Ifs, where the past isn't settled. It's a playground for horrors that could have been. Tonight, we're diving into one of humanity's darkest chapters, the Bhopal gas tragedy. But this isn't just a story about what happened. It's about what if it never stopped. In reality, a Union Carbide pesticide plant leaked 40 tons of methyl isocyanate gas, an invisible, choking, soul-crushing cloud. Over 3,700 people died in the first 24 hours. 500,000 more suffered lifelong injuries, blindness, collapsed lungs, bodies twisted by birth defects. And the survivors, they carried the weight of corporate greed and government silence for decades. But what if history branched? What if that night's chemical reaction didn't just poison the air, it warped time itself? Picture this, the gas, thick and hungry, clings to the midnight fog. Instead of rising and dissipating, it ignites, not in flames but in a silent, pulsing ripple. The city doesn't wake, it repeats. You are a worker at the Union Carbide plant, or maybe a mother in a slum, a student walking home. On December 2, 1984, you feel it, the same dread, the same pressure in your chest, the same impossible sense of déjà vu. You've lived this day before, and the day after, and the day after that. The gas doesn't kill you, it traps you. Each cycle begins the same. The sirens wail, the acrid stench of death, the panic in the streets. But in this version, the survivors don't escape. They relive it, again and again. The bodies pile up only to vanish at dawn, reset like pieces on a board. The city scrubs itself clean. The world forgets, but you remember. What would you do? Would you try to warn others knowing it's futile? Would you search for a way to break the loop, even if it means confronting the shadows of your own past? Or would you surrender to the madness, praying for death to finally stick? This isn't just a tale of corporate negligence. It's a supernatural spiral where time is a weapon and you're its prisoner. If you think you could survive, hit that subscribe button now, because what's coming will test your will to live. Like, share, and drop a comment below. What would you do if trapped in Bhopal's toxic repeat? But as the darkness closes in, a new horror awaits in the shadows. You wake up in your modest Bhopal home on December 2, 1984. The air is thick with the familiar humidity of central India, heavy and clinging like a damp blanket. Outside your window, roosters crow in the pre-dawn darkness, and already you can hear the distant call of street vendors preparing their chai stalls for the morning rush. The sounds are comforting, routine, normal. But there's something else. Something that makes your skin crawl just beneath the surface. You swing your legs out of bed, feet hitting the cool concrete floor of your small bedroom. The house is quiet, your wife still sleeping, your children nestled in their shared room down the narrow hallway. This is your life. Simple, predictable, the kind of existence that millions live across India, where each day bleeds into the next with the steady rhythm of survival and small joys. You pad to the kitchen, lighting the gas burner to brew your morning tea. As the water heats, you glance out the window toward the industrial complex that dominates Bhopal's skyline. The Union Carbide plant, that hulking monument to progress and jobs, where you've worked as a maintenance technician for the past 3 years. The plant that makes 7-pesticide, the miracle chemical that's supposed to revolutionize Indian agriculture, lifting farmers from poverty with higher crop yields. You know that plant better than anyone. Every pipe, every valve, every corner where the company cuts costs to squeeze out a few more rupees in profit. Lately, there have been whispers among the workers. Refrigeration units shut down to save on electricity bills. Safety protocols ignored to meet production quotas. Pressure gauges that haven't been calibrated in months. But this is 1984. This is the new India, embracing economic liberalization and foreign investment. Progress comes with risks, right? That's what the supervisors tell you when you mention the persistent chemical smell that clings to your work clothes, or the way your throat burns after certain shifts. You sip your tea, the familiar ritual grounding you, yet something feels off. You can't quite place it. It's like waking from a dream you can't remember, but that leaves you unsettled all the same. The chai tastes different today, more bitter, or maybe that's just your imagination. By 7 a.m., you're walking through Bhopal's bustling streets. The city is coming alive around you. Children in school uniforms chattering as they hurry past, shopkeepers rolling up metal shutters, the eternal symphony of auto rickshaws and bicycle bells. You nod to familiar faces, exchange pleasantries with neighbors. Mrs. Sharma from the corner grocery store waves as you pass. Her grandson is playing marbles in the dust, the same child who always grins at you with gap-toothed joy. But today his laughter echoes strangely. Too long, too hollow. When you turn back to look, he's already disappeared into the crowd. At the plant gates, you join the stream of workers clocking in for the day shift. Your colleague Raman falls into step beside you, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the morning chill. "Did you hear about the storage tank troubles?" he asks, lowering his voice. "Tank 610. They say there's been water contamination in the methyl isocyanate reserve. The American engineers flew back to Connecticut last month, and now we're supposed to handle the cleanup ourselves." Methyl isocyanate, Mike. The stuff that makes 7 work, but also the stuff that can kill you if you breathe too much of it. You've worked with it long enough to know its reputation. Highly reactive, extremely toxic, the kind of chemical that demands respect and proper handling. "They shut down the refrigeration on that tank weeks ago," you reply, feeling that familiar itch starting in your throat. It's always there now, that slight irritation that makes you clear your throat more than you should. "Cost-cutting measures, they called it." Raman shakes his head. "My wife had another nightmare last night. She woke up screaming, said she dreamed of clouds of poison gas choking the whole city. Strange thing is, my mother-in-law in Delhi called this morning. She had the same dream." You stop walking. The itch in your throat suddenly feels sharper. The same dream. Down to the details. Yellow clouds, people running in the streets, the taste of metal in the air. Raman's voice drops to a whisper. "What are the odds of that?" What are the odds, indeed? You want to dismiss it as coincidence, but something cold and knowing settles in your chest. As you pass through the plant's main entrance, you catch a whiff of something acrid on the morning breeze. Faint, but unmistakable. The sharp, penetrating smell of chemicals where they shouldn't be. Inside the facility, the day unfolds with mechanical precision. You check pressure readings, inspect valve seals, document maintenance schedules. The work is routine, almost meditative. But today, small things keep catching your attention. A wall clock in the break room that seems to tick backward for just a split second when you're not looking directly at it. A supervisor's radio crackling with what sounds like emergency broadcasts, though when you listen closely, it's just the usual weather report. And then there's the smell, growing stronger as the day progresses. During lunch break, you sit with other workers in the plant's courtyard, picking at your wife's homemade roti and dal. The conversation drifts to families, weekend plans, cricket matches, normal things. But underneath it all, you sense a current of unease. Everyone looks tired. Everyone seems to be rubbing their eyes more than usual. "Anyone else feeling strange today?" asks Kumar, one of the newer technicians. "Like we've done all this before." The group falls silent. You realize you're not the only one experiencing that nagging sense of déjà vu. The feeling that today is somehow familiar in a way that defies logic. As evening approaches, you finish your shift and begin the walk home. The streets are busy with the usual evening rush, but you move through it like you're walking underwater. Everything feels muffled, distant. Your wife greets you at the door with concern in her eyes. "You look pale," she says, pressing her palm to your forehead. "And you smell like chemicals more than usual." Over dinner, she mentions her dreams again. The same dreams Raman's wife described, dreams of yellow fog and people gasping for air. Your children eat quietly, picking at their food. Even they seem subdued tonight, as if some invisible weight is pressing down on the entire city. As midnight approaches, you lie in bed listening to the distant hum of the industrial complex. Tonight, that hum seems different, angrier, more urgent. Through your window, you can see lights flickering at the plant, more activity than usual for this hour. Then you hear it, a low rumble that starts deep underground and builds into something that rattles the windows of your home. You sit up, heart pounding, just as a sharp chemical smell suddenly floods your nostrils. Somewhere in the darkness, something has gone terribly wrong. You stumble to the window and see it rising from the plant like a living thing, a pale, ghostly cloud spreading across the city with unnatural speed. The gas, the methyl isocyanate. Tank 610 has ruptured, and 40 tons of death are rolling toward your neighborhood like a tsunami. You try to scream to wake your family, but your throat seizes. The burning sensation spreads through your lungs like acid. Your vision blurs. The world tilts. You collapse, gasping, choking, everything fading to black as the poison fills your home, your street, your city. And then you wake up in your modest Bhopal home. December 2, 1984, the air thick with humidity, roosters crowing the same day. Wait, the same day, but you remember the gas, the choking, the the impossible truth begins to dawn. You realize this nightmare is just beginning. You jolt awake again on December 2, 1984, your heart hammering against your ribs like a trapped bird. The same humid air, the same distant crow of roosters, the same call of chai vendors echoing through Bhopal's narrow streets. Wait! You sit up in bed, sweat-soaked and trembling. The memory of choking, of burning lungs, of that yellow-green cloud rolling through your home like death itself. It felt so real, more than real. You can still taste the metallic bitterness on your tongue, still feel the phantom burn in your throat. But here you are, alive, breathing, staring at the same crack in your bedroom wall that you've seen every morning for 3 years. It was just a dream, had to be, the most vivid, terrifying nightmare of your life, but still just your mind playing tricks. Right. You stumble to the kitchen, hands shaking as you light the gas burner. The flame catches with its usual soft whoosh, and you stare at it longer than necessary. Fire, combustion, the same chemical process that powers the plant where you work, that heats your home, that could. No, stop thinking like that. It was just a dream. But as you prepare your morning tea, muscle memory guiding your movements, something feels wrong. Not just the lingering dread from your nightmare, but something deeper, like walking through a photograph of your own life. Everything is exactly where it should be, exactly as it was, with a precision that defies the natural chaos of existence. Outside your window, the Union Carbide plant squats on Bhopal's horizon like a concrete leviathan. Even from this distance, you can see the smokestacks rising into the gray dawn sky. That plant has transformed your city over the past decade, drawing in workers from across central India. Hindus, Muslims, migrants from rural villages, all united by the promise of steady wages in an economy still finding its footing after decades of socialist planning. Your neighborhood reflects that diversity. The Khans next door, who moved here from Uttar Pradesh when their farm failed. Old Mrs. Patel, who's lived in Bhopal since before partition and remembers when this area was all rice fields. The Sikh family down the street, whose eldest son works in the plant's engineering department. All of you bound together by geography and circumstance, by the shared hope that this foreign company might lift you from poverty. But today, as you walk those familiar streets, every face seems scripted. Every conversation follows a pattern you somehow know by heart. "Morning, brother," calls Rakesh, the shopkeeper who sells newspapers from his tiny stall. "Big news from Delhi today, Indira Gandhi's bodyguards, can you believe it?" He shakes his head with the same mixture of shock and resignation, the same words he spoke yesterday. Or did he? Yesterday feels both impossibly distant and crystal clear. At the plant gates, the same security guard nods as you flash your ID. The same group of workers clusters around the bulletin board, reading the same notices about new safety protocols that nobody really believes will be enforced. Your colleague Raman approaches with his familiar morning complaint about storage tank troubles, and you find yourself mouthing along with his words before he speaks them. "Did you hear about tank 610? He says, exactly as he did before. "Water contamination in the methyl isocyanate reserve. The American engineers flew back to Connecticut last month." You stop walking so abruptly that Raman stumbles. "What did you just say?" Your voice comes out sharper than intended. Raman looks confused. "About the tank, it's been leaking for weeks. Everyone knows." "No, not that. About your wife's nightmare." Now he looks genuinely puzzled. "My wife's what? I didn't mention any nightmare." "But you remember." Vividly. He told you about her dream of poison clouds, about his mother-in-law in Delhi having the same vision. You remember the chill that ran down your spine, the way his words seemed to carry more weight than they should have. "Tell me," you press, grabbing his arm, "has your wife been having strange dreams lately?" The confusion in his eyes deepens, but then something flickers. Recognition? Fear? "How did you?" She woke up screaming last night, said she dreamed of yellow gas choking the whole city. His voice drops to a whisper. "My mother-in-law called this morning. She had the same dream." There it is, word for word, exactly as before. You release his arm, stepping back as the world tilts slightly around you. This isn't déjà vu, this isn't your imagination, this is something else entirely. Inside the plant, you move through your duties like a sleepwalker. Every conversation, every routine task, every small moment unfolds with mechanical precision. Kumar makes his joke about American bosses cutting corners to save a rupee here and there. The supervisor's radio crackles with the same weather report. The wall clock in the break room ticks backward for that same impossible split second. But this time you're watching, really watching. You try small experiments. During the lunch break, instead of sitting in your usual spot, you choose a different table. For a moment, it seems to work. The conversation shifts, takes on N. Yield directions, hope flickers in your chest. Maybe you can change things. Maybe you can break whatever cruel pattern has trapped you. But then Kumar drops his lunch container, spilling dal across the table in exactly the same pattern as before. The supervisor appears with the same complaint about productivity quotas. The afternoon shift begins with identical problems, identical solutions, identical small frustrations that you've somehow already lived through. You feel the weight of unseen eyes watching your every move. Would you tell someone knowing they'd think you'd lost your mind? Would you risk ridicule to warn people about what's coming? The isolation creeps in like fog, thick and suffocating. Are you going insane? Is this what madness feels like? The conviction that you've lived the same day before, that you know what people will say before they say it. As evening approaches, you walk home through streets that feel more like a stage set than a real place. Your wife greets you with the same concern, the same observation about your pale complexion and chemical smell. Dinner unfolds with eerie familiarity, the children picking at their food, your wife mentioning her dreams of yellow fog, the oppressive weight of something building just beyond the horizon. You try to warn them. You try to explain that something terrible is coming, that they need to leave the house, leave the city, run as far as they can before midnight. But the words feel heavy on your tongue, meaningless. Your wife touches your forehead, worried about fever. Your children exchange glances that say their father is acting strange. And then, right on schedule, the rumble begins. You know what's coming this time. You've lived through the death, felt the poison searing your lungs, experienced the darkness that follows. But knowing doesn't make it easier. If anything, the anticipation makes it worse. You stand at your window, watching the pale cloud rise from the plant like some primordial evil awakening from slumber. The gas rolls across the city with patient inevitability. Your family screams, you choke, everything burns, the world goes black. And then, you wake up in your modest Bhopal home on December 2, 1984. But this time, as consciousness returns, you hear something new. A voice, faint as a whisper in the pre-dawn darkness. Not your wife, not your children, something else. Something that knows you're listening. Change it, the voice murmurs, barely audible above the distant roosters. You must change it. But change what? And how can you alter a day that seems carved in stone, a tragedy that refuses to stay in the past? As the impossible truth settles around you like a shroud, one question burns brighter than all the others. What will you alter next? As the impossible truth settles around you like a shroud, one question burns brighter than all the others. What will you alter next? This time, when you wake on December 2, 1984, there's no confusion, no desperate hope that it was all a nightmare. The whisper still echoes in your mind. Change it, like a command from something beyond the veil of normal reality. You sit up in bed, fully alert, your engineer's mind already working through the problem like a complex equation. This isn't madness. This is a loop, a temporal prison built from 40 tons of methyl isocyanate and something far more sinister. The gas leak didn't just poison Bhopal's air, it poisoned time itself, creating a wound in reality that bleeds the same day over and over again. But if you're trapped here, if some force has cursed you to witness this tragedy endlessly, then there must be a reason, a purpose. Maybe you're not just a victim, maybe you're meant to be the solution. You dress quickly, your movements sharp and purposeful. No time for the usual morning rituals. Today, you're going to explore parts of the plant you've never accessed before. Today, you're going to find answers. The streets of Bhopal unfold around you with their familiar rhythm, but now you see them differently. The children playing cricket in the dust, the women hanging laundry on rooftops, the old men sharing tea and gossip, all of them living their last day without knowing it. Unless you can change something, unless you can break the cycle that's trapped them in tomorrow's nightmare. At the plant, you don't follow your usual routine. Instead, you head toward the restricted areas, the maintenance sections where only senior engineers are supposed to go. Your worker's badge shouldn't get you access, but somehow it does. The security guard who should stop you is distracted by a phone call. The locked door you encounter swings open when you try the handle. The loop wants you here. The question is why? The deeper sections of the Union Carbide plant feel different from the areas you know. The air is thicker, more oppressive, carrying that faint chemical tang that makes your throat burn. The pipes here are larger, more complex, snaking through concrete corridors like the arteries of some massive organism. You can hear them groaning under pressure, a sound that's almost organic, almost alive. You find what you're looking for in Section C, the methyl isocyanate storage tanks. Tank 610 looms before you like a steel monument to corporate negligence. Even from a distance, you can see the problems: corrosion around valve fittings, temperature readings that are far too high, pressure gauges that haven't been calibrated in months. But there's something else, something that wasn't in any of the safety reports you've read over the years. The flare tower, the safety system designed to burn off excess gas before it can reach dangerous levels, is completely inactive. Not just shut down for maintenance, but deliberately disabled. Wires have been cut. Control circuits have been bypassed. Someone wanted this system to fail. You approach tank 610 with growing dread. The metal is warm to the touch, far warmer than it should be. Inside, you know water has contaminated the methyl isocyanate reserve, triggering a chemical reaction that's building toward catastrophic failure. In the original timeline, the real timeline, this was an accident. Cost-cutting measures, ignored safety protocols, corporate indifference to Indian lives. But here, in this twisted version of events, you're beginning to suspect something darker. You try to turn the emergency relief valve, hoping to bleed off some of the pressure before it reaches critical levels. The valve spins freely in your hands, but nothing happens. The pressure gauge doesn't budge. It's as if the physical world itself is resisting your attempts to change the outcome. That's when you hear them, footsteps echoing through the corridors behind you, even though you know you're alone in this section. You turn but see nothing, just empty hallways stretching back toward the main plant. Yet the sound continues, sometimes matching your own steps, sometimes running ahead of you like a scout preparing an ambush. You press on, checking other systems, looking for any way to prevent what's coming. The refrigeration units that should keep the mic at safe temperatures are offline, not broken, but systematically shut down. The pressure relief systems have been tampered with. Even the emergency communications equipment has been sabotaged. This wasn't corporate negligence, this was deliberate. As you work, the hallucinations begin. Conversations that loop mid-sentence, like broken records skipping over the same few words. Shadows that move independently of their sources. Clock faces that melt and reform, their hands spinning backward and forward in manic spirals. The loop's supernatural grip is tightening, and your mind is starting to fracture under the strain. You stumble out of the plant during lunch break, desperate for fresh air and normal human contact. Outside, Bhopal swelters under the December sun, but the heat feels wrong somehow, too intense, too focused, like light passing through a magnifying glass. You walk through the crowded marketplace, past vendors selling vegetables and sweets, past children begging for coins from passing workers. One of them approaches you, a girl no more than 8 years old, her clothes patched and repatched, her eyes holding intelligence far beyond her years. She tugs at your sleeve with small, insistent fingers. "Sahib," she says, "the plant. There's something wrong with the plant. My grandmother, she dreams of yellow clouds every night now. She says the spirits are angry." You kneel down to her level, studying her face. What else does your grandmother see in these dreams? Men in suits, foreign men, they came at night weeks ago. They did something to the machines. She says they made a deal with something dark, something hungry. The girl's voice drops to a whisper. She says the earth itself will weep poison. Before you can ask more questions, the girl vanishes into the crowd. You search for her, pushing through the maze of vendors and shoppers, but she's gone as completely as if she never existed. Did she? Or was she another hallucination, another symptom of your fragmenting sanity? As the day wears on, you face a terrible choice. You could try to warn the plant managers about what you've discovered, tell them about the sabotage, the deliberate system failures. But would they believe you? Would they act on your warnings, or would they dismiss you as a delusional worker suffering from chemical exposure? Or you could try to evacuate your family, get them out of the city before midnight. But you know from experience that they won't listen, won't abandon their lives based on what sounds like the ravings of a madman. What path would you take? Confront the managers with evidence they might ignore, or focus on saving the people you love most? The moral weight settles on your chest like a physical pressure. Every choice feels wrong. Every path leads to death and suffering. Maybe that's the point. Maybe this loop isn't about preventing the tragedy. Maybe it's about making you complicit in it, forcing you to choose who lives and who dies. Evening approaches with its familiar dread. You return home to the same concerned wife, the same worried children, the same dinner conversation that now feels scripted by malevolent forces. But this time, you pay attention to details you missed before. Your wife mentions a news report about American executives leaving the country suddenly. Your neighbor talks about strange deliveries to the plant at odd hours. The pieces of a larger conspiracy begin to emerge. As midnight approaches and the rumble begins, you position yourself at your window with grim determination. The pale cloud rises from the plant on schedule, but this time you're watching for something specific. As the gas rolls across the city and the screaming begins, as your own lungs start to burn and your vision blurs, you catch a glimpse of something in the chaos. A document, papers scattered by the wind from the plant's administrative building. In your fading vision, you make out words: Project Kali, deliberate contamination protocol, and a signature you recognize, not from Union Carbide but from something much worse. The poison claims you again, darkness swallowing the world whole. But as the loop resets and consciousness returns to your modest Bhopal home, you're no longer just a victim. You're a detective armed with terrible knowledge. Someone didn't just allow this disaster to happen, they orchestrated it. And now you have a clue to follow. The question is, what other horrors will you uncover when you dig deeper into the conspiracy that turned Bhopal into a temporal prison? You wake on December 2, 1984, but this time something's different. The memory of that document, Project Kali, deliberate contamination protocol, burns in your mind like a brand. It wasn't just a hallucination brought on by poison and panic. It was real enough to change everything about how you understand this nightmare. You bolt upright, ignoring your wife's startled questions, and dress with frantic urgency. Outside, Bhopal is stirring to life with its usual chaotic energy, but now you see the subtle wrongness everywhere. The clock tower in the city center runs backward for several seconds before lurching forward again. Street dogs bark at shadows that don't match the people casting them. A fruit vendor's radio crackles with tomorrow's news, reports of a gas leak that hasn't happened yet. The loop is deteriorating, getting sloppy, and maybe that's your chance. You race through the narrow streets, past chai vendors whose steam rises in impossible spirals, past children whose laughter echoes with the voices of the dead. The morning train from Delhi rumbles into the station exactly on schedule, but through its windows you glimpse passengers who shimmer like mirages, their one moment gone the next. At the plant, you don't waste time with your usual work routine. You head straight for the administrative building, the concrete fortress where the real decisions get made, where the real conspiracies are planned. Your hands shake as you approach the security desk, but the guard waves you through without looking up from his newspaper. In the margins, you notice someone has scribbled chemical formulas that make your blood run cold. The building's corridors stretch longer than they should, like reality itself is being stretched and twisted by invisible forces. Fluorescent lights flicker in patterns that almost seem like Morse code, SOS, SOS, SOS. But when you stop to listen, they fall silent. You find the document room on the third floor, a cramped space filled with filing cabinets and the musty smell of old paper. But this time, you're not looking for safety reports or maintenance schedules. You're hunting for something much more dangerous. Project Kali, the papers you glimpsed in your dying moments, scattered by wind through the chaos of the gas leak. They have to be here somewhere, hidden among the mundane bureaucracy of industrial murder. As you search, pulling files and scanning folders with growing desperation, you start to see them, your coworkers, trapped in their own versions of this endless day. Raman stands in the corner, having the same conversation with an invisible supervisor about tank maintenance. Kumar sits at a desk, typing the same report over and over, his fingers bleeding from hours of repetitive motion he doesn't remember. They don't see you, can't see you. They're locked in their own loops within the loop, playing out their roles like actors who have forgotten they're in a play. The horror of it hits you like a physical blow. How many people are trapped here? How many souls are imprisoned in December 2, 1984, forced to relive their last day in endless, meaningless repetition? Looking for something. You spin around to find a woman standing in the doorway, middle-aged, wearing a faded sari, her eyes holding the same haunted awareness you see in your own reflection. She's not looping. She's awake like you. You're searching for the Kali documents, she continues, stepping into the room with careful precision. I can see it in your face, the same desperation I felt when I first realized what they did to us. Who are you? Your voice comes out as a croak. Dr. Priya Sharma. I was a consultant for the plant's safety committee. Was supposed to inspect the mic storage systems in November, but my report was buried before I could file it officially. She laughs bitterly. Turns out corporate had other plans for Bhopal. She moves to a filing cabinet you hadn't searched yet, produces a key from her pocket, and unlocks a drawer marked classified research. Inside are folders thick with documents, photographs, and what looks like chemical analysis reports. "How long have you been awake in the loop?" you ask, approaching cautiously. "Longer than you, long enough to piece together most of what happened." She spreads the papers across a nearby desk. Project Kali wasn't just about cutting safety costs, it was an experiment. They wanted to see what would happen if they combined methyl isocyanate with certain other compounds. The documents are nightmare fuel, chemical formulas that shouldn't exist. T.est results from experiments conducted on lab rats that resulted in temporal anomalies. Correspondence between Union Carbide executives and researchers from organizations you've never heard of, groups with names like Chronos Initiative and Temporal Dynamics Research. "They knew," Dr. Sharma continues, her voice steady despite the horror of what she's revealing. "They knew the gas leak would kill thousands, but that was just the beginning. The real experiment was what would happen to the survivors. What would happen to time itself when 40 tons of enhanced mic interacted with atmospheric moisture at precisely the right conditions? You feel the gas's invisible tendrils coiling in your lungs, not physically, not yet, but the memory of countless deaths burning in your chest like a constant reminder of the cycle's grip. They created the loop deliberately. Not deliberately, but they knew it was possible. The documents call it temporal crystallization, a state where traumatic events become self-perpetuating, trapping consciousness in recursive cycles." She points to a photograph showing the plant on the night of December 2, 1984. In the image, the gas cloud isn't just spreading, it's pulsing with an inner light that looks almost organic. They wanted to weaponize human suffering. As you read deeper into the files, the moral weight of the situation crushes down on you. You could spend this loop trying to save specific people, warning your neighbors, evacuating the slums near the plant, focusing on individual acts of mercy. But would that change anything fundamental about the conspiracy? Would it break the cycle, or just rearrange the deck chairs on a sinking ship? On the other hand, you could focus on exposing the truth, on finding a way to break the loop entirely. But that might mean sacrificing opportunities to save lives in the short term, letting people die while you pursue the larger solution. Would you risk alerting authorities, knowing the loop might punish deviation? Would you choose to save the few you can reach, or gamble everything on freeing everyone? Through the window, you can see the first signs of the approaching disaster. Wisps of vapor beginning to leak from the plant's ventilation systems hours earlier than they should. The loop is compressing, the timeline becoming unstable. "There's something else," Dr. Sharma says, following your gaze. "Someone else. Another executive who was supposed to die in the original timeline but managed to survive by other means. He's here, somewhere in the loop, and he's been trying to make contact." Before you can ask more questions, the building shakes with the familiar rumble of catastrophic failure. But this time it's different, earlier, more violent, as if the loop itself is losing coherence. You grab the Project Kali documents, stuffing them into your shirt as the first screams echo from the plant floor below. The gas is coming, but now you have proof of the conspiracy, evidence of the crime, knowledge of the enemy. As you and Dr. Sharma race toward the stairs, the building's lights begin to strobe in that same SOS pattern. The walls shimmer like water. Reality is coming apart at the seams. You reach the ground floor just as the pale cloud begins its deadly advance across Bhopal. In the chaos of evacuating workers and spreading panic, you catch sight of a figure moving against the crowd. A man in an expensive suit, walking calmly toward the plant instead of away from it. He turns as if sensing your gaze and smiles. His face is pale, too pale, and his eyes reflect light like a cat's. When he speaks, his voice carries over the screaming and sirens with impossible clarity. "You're learning," he says. "Good, we need to talk." The gas claims you both, consciousness fading as the poison fills your lungs once again. But as darkness closes in, you realize you're not alone anymore. There are others awake in this nightmare, others who remember. The question is, in a world where death has lost its meaning and time is a weapon, can you trust them as the cycle claims you once more? You wake on December 2, 1984, but this time you're not alone in your head. There's another voice threading through your thoughts like smoke through cracks in a wall, calm, measured, and undeniably real. "Don't panic," the voice says, though you recognize it as belonging to the pale-eyed man in the expensive suit. "The connection will stabilize in a moment, side effect of dying together in the same temporal fracture." You sit up in bed, your wife stirring beside you, and the voice continues. "My name is Harrison Webb. I was Union Carbide's liaison with the other projects, the ones that weren't supposed to exist. And yes, before you ask, I'm as trapped as you are." The connection feels invasive, like having someone else's thoughts mixed with your own. You can sense his presence somewhere else in the looping city, feel his emotions bleeding through the psychic link. Fear, guilt, and something else, a calculating coldness that makes your skin crawl. "We have options," Webb's voice continues as you dress with mechanical precision. "The loop has rules, but rules can be bent, broken. I've discovered 3 potential paths to freedom, but none of them come without cost." Outside, Bhopal stretches and yawns into another doomed day, but the wrongness is accelerating. Shadows stretch unnaturally long even in the morning light, reaching toward the plant like grasping fingers. A fruit cart overturns for no reason, oranges rolling uphill against gravity. The city's clocks don't just run backward now, they sometimes stop entirely, as if time itself is holding its breath. "Path 1, Webb explains as you walk through streets that feel increasingly surreal, requires us to work together. Sabotage the plant before the leak occurs, but not to prevent it, to redirect it. Channel the gas into a contained explosion that might shatter the temporal prison entirely." You pause at an intersection where the traffic light cycles through colors that don't exist, deep purples and burning golds that hurt to look at directly. A child chases a ball that phases in and out of existence, her laughter echoing from yesterday and tomorrow simultaneously. "The risk," Webb continues, "is that we might not destroy the loop. We might expand it, turn all of India into our eternal December 2nd. Imagine millions of souls trapped in repetition, gasping out their last breaths over and over again. The weight of historical victims presses down on your chest like a physical force. You know the real numbers. Over 3,700 dead in the first wave, 500,000 poisoned, generations born with twisted limbs and failing organs. All because of corporate greed and criminal negligence. And now you're considering making it infinitely worse." The psychological whispers start then, soft at first but growing louder with each step. Voices of the dead, or maybe the voices of the living trapped in other loops you can't see. They speak in Hindi, English, dozens of regional dialects, all carrying the same message. "Why didn't you save us? Why didn't you warn us? Why didn't you choose differently?" "Path 2, Webb's voice cuts through the chorus of accusation, involves sacrifice. One of us stays behind to anchor the loop while the other attempts to break free. The anchor would experience every death, every moment of agony, concentrated into a single consciousness. Eternal suffering to purchase temporary freedom." You reach the plant gates, where the security guard waves you through with eyes that reflect silver like mercury. His movements are too smooth, too precise, as if he's being operated by invisible strings. Around you, other workers shuffle toward their duties with the blank expressions of sleepwalkers. But some of them aren't sleepwalking anymore. You catch glimpses of awareness in certain faces, a maintenance worker who stares at you with desperate recognition, a secretary who mouths, "Help me," before snapping back into her scripted routine. The loop is developing pockets of consciousness, creating a paranoid society where nobody knows who's awake and who's still dreaming. Inside the plant, the atmosphere has changed. The air tastes wrong, not just the usual chemical tang, but something organic and hungry. The pipes don't just groan under pressure anymore, they pulse like arteries in some vast circulatory system. The methyl isocyanate isn't just stored in tank 610, it's growing, evolving, feeding on the temporal energy that sustains the loop. Path 3, Webb whispers as you approach the storage area, is the most dangerous. We let the loop continue, but we change its nature. Instead of breaking free, we become its masters, reshape the repetition to our will, create our own version of December 2nd where we hold the power of gods. You stand before the valve that could release the pressure, prevent the explosion, potentially save thousands of lives for one more cycle. Your hand hovers over the metal wheel, trembling with the weight of impossible choices. Turn it, and you might doom everyone to eternal repetition. Leave it, and you condemn them to one more night of agony. The whispers grow louder, more insistent. You feel the gaze of unseen observers, other loopers perhaps, or something else entirely. Entities born from repeated trauma, consciousness without flesh, watching your every move with predatory interest. The gas has learned, Webb's voice takes on an urgent tone. It's not just a chemical anymore. Each cycle feeds it, makes it stronger. It's developing intentions, goals beyond mere destruction. Through the reinforced windows of the storage facility, you see it, the pale cloud that shouldn't exist for hours yet, beginning to seep from hairline cracks in Tank 610's walls. But this time it moves with purpose, flowing against the wind, seeking out specific targets with malevolent intelligence. The facility's lights flicker in that familiar SOS pattern, but now you understand it's not a distress signal. It's communication. The loop itself is trying to talk, to negotiate, to make deals with consciousness trapped in its web. You taste the acrid fog creeping through the ventilation systems, feel time's weight pressing like invisible chains around your limbs. The decision point approaches with inexorable certainty. In moments, you'll have to choose, sabotage and risk everything, sacrifice yourself or Webb for a chance at freedom, or embrace the darkness and become something monstrous but powerful. What choice would you make in this fork? Would you gamble with the lives of millions or accept the burden of eternal suffering? Comment below, because your decision matters more than you know. As your hand moves toward the valve, Webb's voice turns sharp with alarm. Wait, something's wrong. The pattern is changing. This isn't how it's supposed to. The valve turns under your touch before you've decided to tour. In it, the pressure readings spike beyond their normal parameters. Tank 610 doesn't just leak. It explodes with violent temporal energy that sends ripples through the fabric of reality itself. You feel the loop shudder, warp, stretch like taffy pulled between invisible hands. Colors bleed from the world, leaving everything in shades of gray and rust. The repeated voices of the dead grow silent, replaced by something far more terrifying, the sound of the loop itself screaming. But as your decision triggers a violent temporal shudder and the world warps into uncharted territory, you realize Webb's silence might be more significant than his words. In a prison built from betrayal and corporate conspiracy, can you trust anyone? The darker branch awaits, where alliance becomes treachery and salvation might be the cruelest trap of all. The loop resets with a violence you've never felt before, not the usual gentle fade to black followed by awakening, but a jarring slam that leaves you gasping on your bedroom floor like you've been dropped from a great height. Your head rings with the sound of fracturing glass, and for a moment you taste copper and ozone, the flavor of betrayal itself. Webb's voice is still there in your mind, but it's different now. Strained, guilty. The psychic connection that once felt invasive now burns like an infected wound. You need to know the truth, he says, and even through the mental link you can hear him struggling with the words. About what I did, about why I'm really here. You pull yourself to your feet, the familiar December 2nd morning light streaming through your windows feeling more like a spotlight in an interrogation room. Everything looks the same, the crack in the wall, the sound of roosters, the distant hum of the plant. But underneath the surface, reality has developed hairline fractures. I wasn't just a liaison, Webb continues as you dress with mechanical precision, your hands shaking with more than morning cold. I was the engineer who designed the storage modifications, the ones that made the leak possible, the ones that ensured it would be catastrophic when it happened. The confession hits you like a physical blow. As you walk through Bhopal's streets, the city feels different, more watchful, more suspicious. People glance at each other with narrowed eyes, as if everyone might be carrying invisible poison. The gas's temporal rift is feeding on distrust now, warping the social fabric of the looped city into something paranoid and toxic. It wasn't supposed to happen that night, Webb's voice cracks with 3 decades of suppressed guilt. The leak was meant to be controlled, contained, a demonstration for certain interested parties. Military applications, they said, chemical warfare research disguised as industrial accident, but something went wrong. The reaction was too violent, the death toll too high, and the temporal effects, those were completely unexpected. You pass a group of children playing in the dust, but their game has changed. Instead of cricket or marbles, they're divided into 2 factions, pointing accusing fingers and chanting rhymes about loyalty tests and punishment. Even in their play, the loop's corruption is spreading, creating a dystopian undercurrent where trust becomes a luxury nobody can afford. The worst part, Webb continues, is that I've been trying to justify it for cycles beyond counting. Telling myself it was an accident, a corporate decision made above my head. But the truth is simpler and more damning. I chose to prioritize career advancement over human lives. I helped design a genocide, and now we're all paying the price in eternal repetition. At the plant, the changes are more obvious. Workers cluster in small groups, whispering and casting suspicious glances at their colleagues. Someone has spray-painted "Trust no one" on the main gate in Hindi and English. The security guards check IDs multiple times, their eyes reflecting the silver sheen that marks those touched by the loop's supernatural influence. You feel the gas's invisible grip tightening around your throat like a noose woven from suspicion and betrayal. Every breath tastes of accusations. Every shadow seems to hide someone listening, judging, waiting for you to make the wrong choice. There's something else you need to understand, Webb's voice grows more urgent. The loop has an anchor, a physical object that maintains the temporal prison. A vial of the original enhanced methyl isocyanate stored in the plant's core vault. Destroy it and the cycle might break, but getting to it requires someone to stay behind to hold the temporal fractures open while the other escapes. A willing sacrifice. You pause outside the administration building, where a crowd has gathered around someone tied to a chair. The man, one of the plant's supervisors, has the haunted look of someone who's been awake in the loop for too long. A makeshift tribunal of workers and residents surrounds him, demanding he confess his role in the coming disaster. "Loyalty test," explains a woman holding a clipboard covered in names and accusations. "We've figured out that some people remember more than others. That means they're either innocent victims or complicit conspirators. We're rooting out the traitors." The dystopian logic is terrifyingly simple. In a world where death has lost its meaning and time itself has become a weapon, suspicion becomes the only defense. The survivors have formed oppressive factions, each convinced that salvation lies in exposing and punishing the guilty. But in a disaster built on corporate conspiracy and government negligence, everyone is guilty of something. The supervisor's voice cracks as he confesses to things he may or may not have done, ignored safety warnings, falsified inspection reports, priority. Zed profits over human lives. Whether his confession is true or coerced no longer matters. The The crowd's need for someone to blame outweighs their concern for justice. You hear distorted whispers echoing from the plant's ventilation systems, fragments of the real historical cover-up that followed the original Bhopal tragedy, delayed evacuations that doomed thousands, executives fleeing to America while victims gasped in overcrowded hospitals, medical studies suppressed to minimize compensation payouts. The loop amplifies these crimes, turning them into a chorus of accusation that never stops. "You have a choice," Webb says, his mental voice heavy with resignation. "Confront me, expose me to your tribunal of survivors, use their rage to power a temporal break that might free everyone. I deserve whatever punishment you think fits my crimes." But the alternative path beckons too: forgiveness, collaboration, the terrible risk of shared delusion. You've seen what happens to those who work together in the loop's fractured reality. They begin to see things that aren't there, hear voices that speak in multiple languages, experience phantom pains from injuries that never heal because death keeps resetting them. The moral dilemma tears at you like physical pain. Sacrifice Webb to steal his knowledge of the loop anchor, or spare him and face the collective punishment of a city that's learned to eat its own in search of answers that don't exist. In this fork of fate, would you betray first to survive? Would you choose vengeance over mercy, knowing that either path might damn you all to deeper cycles of repetition and blame? As you wrestle with the choice, you start experiencing the loop's most insidious psychological twist, visions of generational health horrors that haven't happened yet but feel devastatingly real. You see your unborn children gasping with damaged lungs, your grandchildren born with twisted limbs, a genetic legacy of corporate greed that stretches into a future that may never come. The plant's sirens begin their familiar wail hours early, but this time they're accompanied by something new. Voices calling your name, demanding you choose a side, make a decision, accept responsibility for crimes you didn't commit but failed to prevent. The gas starts seeping from cracks that shouldn't exist yet, flowing with purposeful intelligence toward those marked for judgment. You realize with growing horror that the temporal rift has evolved beyond mere repetition. It's become a tribunal, weighing souls and finding them wanting. As your choice between vengeance and mercy unleashes a cascade of fractured timelines, the loop spirals deeper into something that transcends mere horror. The gas doesn't just kill anymore, it judges, and the weight of its verdict presses down on every consciousness trapped in its eternal courtroom. But even in the depths of this nightmare, redemption's path beckons through the toxic fog, fraught with perils that will test not just your survival instincts, but the very core of what makes you human. The reset doesn't just restart this time. It tears you from one reality and hurls you into another with the force of a temporal hurricane. You're not waking up in your modest bedroom on December 2, 1984. You're falling through layers of fractured time, watching dozens of versions of yourself make different choices, experience different horrors, die in different ways. And then you land hard on cold concrete, gasping and disoriented, in a place that shouldn't exist. You're inside the Union Carbide plant, but not the version you know. This is the facility's heart, its deepest level, where the gas rift has carved out a space between seconds. The walls pulse with veins of luminescent vapor, and the air itself seems alive, thick with ethereal mist that tastes of decay and regret. Overhead, where the ceiling should be, there's only a pulsating void that draws your gaze like a black hole draws light. The rift, the source, the wound in reality that feeds on human suffering and grows stronger with each cycle of repetition. As you struggle to your feet, you realize you're not alone. Scattered throughout this impossible space are others, loopers who have been judged and found wanting, their consciousness drawn here for final evaluation. Some you recognize from the plant's workforce. Others are strangers, perhaps pulled from different cycles, different versions of the same endless day. Dr. Priya Sharma approaches from the shadows, but she's changed. Her eyes hold depths that speak of witnessing horrors beyond counting. "Welcome to the core," she says, her voice echoing strangely in the distorted space. This is where the loop decides who deserves escape and who deserves eternal punishment. The rift pulses above you, and suddenly you're experiencing it. Every choice you've made, every path you've taken, every moment of cowardice or courage played back in vivid, excruciating detail. You see yourself warning coworkers who don't listen. You see yourself trying to evacuate your family who won't believe. You see yourself torn between saving individuals and breaking the cycle entirely. But worse than reliving your own choices, you're forced to witness the original disaster with amplified dread. Crowds fleeing in slow-motion agony, their screams echoing eternally in the metallic air. Children gasping for breath that burns their lungs. Mothers clutching infants who'll never draw clean air again. The images assault you with supernatural intensity, each death weighing on your conscience as if you'd personally failed every victim. The rift judges based on accumulated guilt, Dr. Sharma explains, watching your reaction with clinical detachment. Not just what you did, but what you failed to do. Every life you didn't save, every warning you didn't give, every moment you chose self-preservation over heroism. Around you, other loopers are experiencing their own judgments. Some collapse under the weight of their revealed failures. Others rage against the cosmic unfairness of being held responsible for a disaster they didn't cause. A few, terrifyingly few, stand with calm acceptance, having somehow made peace with their choices. There are two paths from here, a new voice says, and you turn to see Webb emerging from the shadows. But he's different too, translucent, flickering as if he's being slowly erased. The resistance path, where we band together to fight the loop's authority, or the solitary path, where you face the rift alone and risk everything on a single, perfect choice. The resistance path leads deeper into the plant's impossible architecture, where other awakened loopers have carved out a hidden sanctuary. You glimpse them through the mist, engineers, workers, residents, all united by their refusal to accept eternal punishment for crimes they didn't commit. They've been battling what they call gas guardians, psychological manifestations of authority figures that enforce the cycle's rules. You see them now, these guardians. Union Carbide executives with faces made of poison vapor, government officials whose words turn to toxic gas when they speak, police officers whose badges gleam with the same silver sheen that marks the loop's influence. They patrol the corridors of this twisted facility, hunting down those who dare question the rift's judgment. "Join us," whispers a maintenance worker whose name you can't remember but whose face is burned into your memory from dozens of repeated cycles. "We've found a way to disrupt the temporal anchors. If enough of us work together, we might be able to destabilize the entire loop." But the solitary path calls to you too, promising a more direct confrontation with the source of your torment. Through the plant's warped corridors, you can see it, Tank 610, but transformed into something nightmarish. The storage tank has become a shrine to the rift, its metal surface covered in equations that hurt to look at directly. The faulty equipment that caused the original disaster now pulses with temporal energy, each broken valve and corroded pipe serving as a focal point for the loop's power. The whispers start then, doubt-inducing voices that seem to come from the walls themselves. What if escape means dooming others to eternal isolation? They ask. What if your freedom comes at the cost of trapping someone else in your place? What if the only way to end everyone's suffering is to accept yours? You navigate corridors slick with ethereal mist, the air heavy with the scent of industrial death and accumulated guilt. Each step forward brings new moral dilemmas. Do you abandon the resistance to focus on saving your own family? Do you lead a doomed uprising against forces beyond human comprehension? Do you sacrifice yourself to become the loop's willing anchor, holding the temporal prison together while others find freedom? The atmospheric pressure builds around you like a vice. Every breath tastes of methyl isocyanate and regret. Every heartbeat echoes with the screams of 3,000 victims whose deaths you've witnessed over and over again. The rift above pulses in rhythm with your pulse, as if it's synchronizing itself with your life force. The choice has to be yours, Dr. Sharma says, but her voice sounds distant, as if she's speaking across vast amounts of time. The rift feeds on forced decisions, on coercion and desperation. Only a truly free choice can break the cycle, but freedom means accepting full responsibility for whatever comes next. What would you sacrifice at the rift's edge? Would you choose solidarity with fellow sufferers or face the void alone? Would you accept punishment for crimes you didn't commit, or fight against cosmic injustice knowing you might make everything worse? The plant shudders around you as the rift reaches some kind of critical threshold. Cracks appear in the walls, leaking not just toxic gas but fractured time itself. Through the gaps, you catch glimpses of other realities, worlds where the leak never happened, worlds where it consumed entire continents, worlds where humanity learned to harness temporal wounds as weapons of war. The void above you pulses with accumulated data from every choice you've made across countless cycles. It's reached its verdict, but before it can render judgment, the facility's foundations crack with explosive violence. Reality itself is coming apart, and you realize this isn't just about your personal escape anymore. As the void pulses with your accumulated choices and renders its cosmic verdict, a climactic fracture erupts through the very fabric of the loop, propelling you toward revelations that will either damn or save not just yourself, but everyone trapped in this temporal hell. But the loop's final secrets demand one last, harrowing choice that will test everything you've learned about sacrifice, redemption, and the true cost of breaking free from history's most persistent nightmare. The fracture doesn't just crack reality, it shatters it completely. You're hurled through a kaleidoscope of broken time, past fragments of every choice you've made, every death you've witnessed, every moment of hope crushed under the weight of repetition. The Union Carbide plant dissolves around you like sugar in acid rain, revealing something far more terrible beneath its industrial facade. You land hard on ground that pulses with organic warmth, and you realize you're not in a building anymore. You're inside something alive. The rift has revealed its true nature, not just a wound in time, but a living manifestation of collective trauma. The walls around you aren't concrete and steel. They're made from crystallized grief, hardened regret, and the fossilized screams of 3,000 souls who died on December 3, 1984. But there's more. The rift speaks, not with words but with pure emotion that floods your consciousness like poisoned water, and what it tells you changes everything. This isn't just about the gas leak. This isn't just about corporate negligence or temporal anomalies. The loop exists because of the survivors, the real survivors from the original timeline, the ones who lived through that night and carried the guilt of breathing while others suffocated. Their collective trauma, amplified by decades of inadequate justice and forgotten suffering, has punctured our reality itself. You see them now, ghostly figures moving through the crystallized space around you, mothers who lost children, workers who evacuated while neighbors died, officials who could have sounded alarms earlier, doctors who couldn't save everyone, all of them bound together by a question that has no answer. Why did I live when others died? The anchor, Dr. Sharma's voice reaches you from somewhere in the crystalline maze, but she sounds different now, more real, more present. It's not a vial of enhanced chemicals, it's a nexus, a concentration of unresolved guilt so powerful it's created its own gravitational pull on the timeline. You claw through the plant's ruins, but these aren't the ruins of machinery. They're the ruins of peace, of innocence, of the simple belief that corporations care more about human life than quarterly profits. Your heart races as temporal echoes replay the gas's release around you, but this time you see something different. Glimpses of alternate escapes. Visions of what could have been if different choices had been made. In one echo, you see early warning systems that actually worked. In another, evacuation protocols that prioritized human life over property damage. In yet another, you witness executives who chose transparency over cover-up, who flew to Bhopal to take responsibility instead of fleeing to corporate headquarters in Connecticut. But the most powerful vision shows you something else entirely, a hidden formula buried deep in Union Carbide's classified research that could have neutralized the methyl isocyanate before it reached critical toxicity. Not prevented the leak, but transformed it from a holocaust into a manageable industrial accident. The knowledge was there. The solution existed. It was simply deemed too expensive to implement. The nexus pulses with accumulated regret, and suddenly you understand the choice before you. You can expose the nexus, shatter it completely, and potentially free not just yourself, but every consciousness trapped in the loop's web. But doing so would mean accepting erasure, becoming the permanent anchor that holds the temporal fracture closed while others escape. Or you can seal the nexus, reinforcing its power while carving out a personal escape route that leads only you back to linear time. Freedom for one, eternal imprisonment for everyone else. The psychological horror intensifies as illusions of lost loved ones begin to materialize around you. Your wife appears, her face pale and accusatory. "You could have saved us," she whispers. "You knew what was coming. You felt it in the air, smelled it on the wind, but you chose to sleep through the warnings." Your children manifest next, their small hands reaching toward you with desperate need. "Daddy, why didn't you wake us up? Why didn't you carry us away from the poison clouds?" Their voices echo with the pain of 3,000 families who had no warning, no chance to save themselves. But these aren't just your family. They're amalgamations of every victim, every survivor, every person whose life was shattered by corporate indifference and criminal negligence. The nexus is forcing you to experience the weight of collective trauma, to feel personally responsible for a disaster that was decades in the making. "There's another way," a new voice cuts through the emotional assault. It's Webb, but he's changed again, no longer the guilt-ridden executive or the manipulative ally. He's become something cleaner, more honest. "I found it in the deepest records, the ones they thought they'd destroyed. A countermeasure, not just for the loop, but for the original disaster's lasting effects." He shows you visions of future Bhopals, cities where the groundwater runs clean, where children are born without the genetic scarring of their parents' exposure, where the industrial infrastructure serves humanity instead of exploiting it. But achieving this future requires more than just breaking the loop. It requires changing the very nature of how the disaster is remembered, how its lessons are learned, how its victims are honored. The choice isn't just about escape, Webb explains as the nexus pulses with increasing urgency around you. It's about transformation. We can use the loop's power not just to free ourselves, but to send a message backward through time, to plant seeds of awareness that might prevent future disasters, even if we can't prevent this one. Pause here. What's your decision? Collective freedom that might change history, or self-preservation that guarantees only your escape? Would you sacrifice yourself to save everyone, or would you prioritize your own survival knowing others will suffer eternally? Comment now and let us know what choice you'd make in this impossible situation. The temporal echoes grow more vivid as you wrestle with the decision. You see Bhopal as it could have been, a thriving industrial center with robust safety protocols, where foreign corporations partnered with local communities instead of exploiting them. You see alternate timelines where the victims' families received justice, where the environmental damage was repaired, where the lessons learned prevented similar disasters in other cities, other countries. But you also see the cost of such transformation, the personal erasure that might be required to anchor such massive changes to the timeline structure. The possibility that saving everyone might mean losing yourself completely, becoming not a person but a principle, not a life but a lesson learned too late. The nexus shudders with your internal conflict, its crystalline surface reflecting not just your face but the faces of everyone you've encountered in the loop. Dr. Sharma with her clinical compassion, Raman with his innocent concern, the beggar child who spoke of grandmother's dreams, all of them waiting for your choice, their fates balanced on the knife's edge of your decision. As you reach toward the nexus with trembling fingers, reality bends around your choice like light around a massive star. But Jay, Just as you're about to make contact, the loop convulses with adaptive violence, shattering your expectations and pulling you into uncharted branches of possibility, where familiar faces, where unfamiliar expressions and alliances reform in ways that will challenge everything you thought you knew about trust, sacrifice, and the true meaning of escape. As alliances solidify and the loop frays, the final confrontation looms, where familiar faces, where unfamiliar expressions and alliances reform in ways that will challenge everything you thought you knew about trust, sacrifice, and the true meaning of escape. The adaptation doesn't just change the game, it flips the entire board. You find yourself standing not in the crystalline nexus of collective trauma, but in Bhopal's fog-shrouded streets on what should be December 2, 1984, but feels like every December 2nd you've ever experienced compressed into a single, impossible moment. And you're not alone. Webb approaches from the swirling mist, but the calculating coldness is gone from his eyes. In its place is something you never expected to see, genuine remorse mixed with desperate hope. The loop is learning from your choices, he says, his voice carrying none of its former manipulation. Every act of compassion, every moment of courage, every time you chose others over yourself, it's been weaving those decisions into the fabric of reality itself. Behind him, other figures emerge from the fog. Dr. Sharma, but not the clinical researcher you knew. This version carries herself with the weight of someone who's found purpose beyond mere survival. Raman, whose innocent concern has evolved into quiet leadership. Even some of the gas guardians you encountered in the plant's twisted depths, their authoritative facades cracked to reveal the frightened humans underneath. The psychological horror isn't the repetition anymore, Dr. Sharma explains as the group moves through streets that shift between familiar and alien with each step. It's the integration. The loop is trying to merge all the timeline fragments, all the different versions of December 2nd, into a single coherent reality. You feel it happening to you, memories that aren't yours flooding your consciousness. You remember being Webb, making the fatal engineering decisions that doomed thousands. You remember being Dr. Sharma, fighting bureaucratic indifference while people died. You remember being every victim, every survivor, every official who could have acted differently. The psychological assault is overwhelming, but there's something different about it this time. Instead of crushing guilt, you feel understanding. The merged memories don't just show you what went wrong, they show you how it could go right. This is the viewer decision, Webb says, and for a moment his voice sounds like it's coming from outside the story itself. Do you integrate these merged memories and use them to create a unified escape plan? Or do you reject them, maintaining your individual identity but losing the collective knowledge needed to break free? The choice tears at you like physical pain, but as you wrestle with the decision, you notice something extraordinary happening around you. The fog-shrouded streets of Bhopal are changing, not deteriorating or becoming more nightmarish, but transforming in ways that suggest healing, growth, adaptation. Street vendors who died in the original disaster are alive here, their stalls selling not just goods but hope itself. Children play in parks where the grass grows green despite decades of chemical contamination. The Union Carbide plant still squats on the horizon, but its smokestacks emit not poison but something that looks almost like aurora light. The rift's pull is weakening, Raman observes with wonder in his voice. Your choices throughout the loops, they've been creating microscopic changes, tiny alterations that the adaptation is now amplifying. You rally in these transformed streets, feeling strength flow into your limbs from sources you can't identify. Historical facts that once felt like chains now fuel your resolve. The international aid failures that left Bhopal's victims to suffer alone, in this merged timeline, those failures become the catalyst for unprecedented cooperation. The corporate cover-ups that denied justice, here, they spark a transparency movement that spreads across the globe. The dread that has been your constant companion for countless loops begins to transform into something else entirely, defiant action. Not just the desperate scrambling of someone trying to escape a nightmare, but the purposeful movement of someone who has found their role in a larger story. There's something you need to see, Webb says, leading you toward what should be the plant but has become something else entirely. A fusion of industrial facility and organic growth, where pipes bloom with crystalline formations that pulse with temporal energy. Inside, you encounter the most unexpected sight of all, a corporate executive you've never seen before, but whose guilt you've experienced through the merged memories. He's elderly, wearing a suit that costs more than most Bhopal families see in a year, but his face carries the weight of 30 years of sleepless nights. "I came back," he says simply. "Not in the original timeline, I was too much of a coward then, but here, in this merged reality, I finally found the courage to return, to face what we did, to offer what I can to help fix it." The moral twist hits you like a revelation. This isn't about punishment or revenge, it's about redemption through shared humanity. Even in the dystopian ruins of corporate negligence and government failure, people can choose to be better than their worst moments. He shows you something that makes your heart race with possibility, a makeshift antidote developed from the same enhanced chemistry that created the temporal loop. Not a cure for what's already a die happened, but a treatment that could prevent the generational damage from spreading further. "The loop gave us something unintended," he explains. "Time to learn from our mistakes, time to develop solutions, time to become the people we should have been from the beginning." But even as hope builds, the supernatural dread returns in subtle ways. The time echoes that have haunted every loop are beginning to fade, but their disappearance threatens something worse: relapse. Without the temporal pressure holding everything in place, will the merged timelines collapse back into their original, tragic form? You feel the weight of tools and knowledge accumulating around you. Not just the antidote, but evacuation protocols that actually work, early warning systems designed by people who learned from failure, international cooperation frameworks built on the foundation of shared guilt and shared responsibility. At this pivotal twist, what would you integrate from the echoes of multiple loops? Would you choose the memories of being the victim, the perpetrator, or the hero? Would you take the collective knowledge knowing it might cost you your individual identity? Let us know in the comments. Your ideas about integration and redemption might inspire our next exploration of alternate history horror. The fog begins to clear from Bhopal's streets, revealing not the city you knew but something transformed, a place where tragedy became the catalyst for unprecedented change, where the worst disaster in industrial history became the foundation for the greatest leap forward in corporate responsibility and international cooperation. But as the merged timelines stabilize and your makeshift alliance prepares for what might be the final push toward freedom, you sense something watching from the clearing mist, not malevolent, but vast and patient, as if the loop itself has one more card to play. As alliances solidify around shared purpose instead of shared suffering, and the rift's power transforms from trap to tool, the final confrontation with the loop's deepest mystery approaches through the dissipating fog. But one last revelation waits in the heart of the transformed plant, a truth that could either complete your liberation or bind you to Bhopal's story forever. The revelation hits you like a freight train made of pure realization. Standing at the threshold of the plant's impossible core, where crystalline formations pulse with temporal energy, and the air itself seems to breathe with accumulated suffering, you finally understand what the loop has been trying to tell you all along. The rift's source isn't just collective trauma or corporate negligence or even supernatural intervention. It's you. Not your actions, not your choices within the loop, but your first moment of awareness on that original December 2nd. The instant when you felt something wrong in the air, smelled the chemical tang that shouldn't have been there, heard the subtle wrongness in the plant's mechanical rhythm. You knew something was coming. Your engineer's instincts, honed by years of industrial experience, were screaming warnings that you chose to ignore because it was easier to believe everything was normal. That moment of willful ignorance, that split-second decision to trust corporate assurances over your own expertise, became the seed around which the temporal rift crystallized. Your subconscious regret, amplified by the enhanced methyl isocyanate's reality-warping properties, created a psychic anchor that trapped not just you but everyone connected to the disaster in an endless cycle of what, if and if only. You see it now, a voice says behind you, and you turn to face something that makes your blood freeze. It's you, but not you. A mirror image wearing the same face but carrying the weight of different choices. This version of yourself radiates the confidence of someone who acted on their instincts, who raised the alarm, who fought against corporate pressure to maintain safety protocols. "I'm what you could have been," your doppelganger explains, its voice carrying harmonics that suggest multiple timelines speaking in unison. The version of yourself that chose courage over compliance, that prioritized human life over job security. But I'm also your prison warden because I exist only to remind you of your failure. The psychological tension ratchets up to unbearable levels as you face this manifestation of your deepest shame. Around you, the plant's transformed architecture begins to shake and buckle. The crystalline formations crack, leaking temporal energy that makes reality flicker like a broken television screen. The loop is destabilizing, and the choice you make here will determine not just your fate, but the fate of everyone trapped in the eternal December 2nd. Merge with me, your mirror self continues, and you can become the person you were meant to be. Accept the responsibility, the guilt, the weight of every life that could have been saved. Become the eternal guardian who holds the timeline stable while others find peace. The alternative hangs unspoken in the air between you. Destroy this manifestation of your regret and claim personal freedom, but potentially doom everyone else to continued imprisonment as the loop collapses into chaos. You stand at the void's edge where the rift pulses with the heartbeat of 3,000 souls, feeling the gas's otherworldly hum vibrate through your bones like the world's most mournful song. But as you wrestle with this ultimate choice, revelations flood your consciousness. Not just about Bhopal, but about the ongoing reality that mirrors this nightmare. You see it with supernatural clarity now, the real-world parallels that make this loop more than just a personal prison. The health crises still ravaging Bhopal's survivors 40 years later. The corporate immunity that shields decision-makers from account. Ability, the environmental damage that continues to poison groundwater and soil. The legal battles that drag on while victims age and die without justice. The loop isn't just about December 2, 1984. It's about every day since then when society chose to forget, to move on, to treat industrial disasters as acceptable costs of economic progress. But there's something else in these revelations, something that fills you with a hopeful surge despite the impossible weight of the choice before you. You see moments of triumph scattered throughout the collapsed timeline, looped innocence saved through clever manipulation of temporal mechanics, warning systems that actually worked when you figured out how to bypass corporate oversight, evacuation protocols that prioritized human life over property damage. You realize that you've been thinking about this all wrong. The choice isn't binary. It's not merge or destroy, collective salvation or personal freedom. It's about transformation, not just accepting responsibility for what went wrong, but taking responsibility for making it right. There's a third option, you say to your mirror self, and watch as surprise flickers across its familiar features. We don't merge and we don't fight, we collaborate. You extend your hand toward the manifestation of your regret, not in submission but in partnership. You represent the courage I lacked. I represent the experience you need. Together, we can create something the loop never anticipated, not a guardian who maintains the prison, but an agent who transforms it into a classroom. The mirrored version of yourself hesitates, then slowly reaches out to clasp your offered hand. The moment of contact sends shockwaves through the crystalline core, but instead of destruction, you feel integration. Not the loss of identity that merging would bring, but the synthesis of possibility and reality, regret and determination, failure and the will to do better. Around you, the plant's impossible architecture begins to shift again, but this time towards something that looks almost hopeful. The pipes that once carried poison now flow with light. The storage tanks that held death now pulse with potential. The chemical formulas etched into the crystalline walls transform from equations of destruction into blueprints for healing. You feel power flowing through you, not the power to escape the loop, but the power to transform it into something constructive. The temporal energy that once trapped consciousness in repetitive suffering now becomes a tool for education, for prevention, for ensuring that the lessons of Bhopal reach every corner of time where similar disasters might unfold. This is it. What's your ultimate choice? Would you take on the eternal responsibility of transforming tragedy into teacher? Would you sacrifice your escape to become a guardian of industrial safety across all timelines? Comment below and vote on the outcome, because in stories about corporate accountability and personal responsibility, your voice matters. As you make your decision, you feel it rippling outward through the fabric of reality itself, touching every consciousness trapped in the loop, every soul affected by the original disaster, every future decision-maker who might face similar moral crossroads. The eternal cycle doesn't shatter, it transforms, becoming not a prison but a lighthouse that beams warnings across time itself. Your decision cascades through reality like dominoes falling in reverse, building something instead of destroying it. And as the loop's nature fundamentally shifts from repetition to revelation, you sense the final pieces clicking into place. But even as reality stabilizes around your transformed choice, a lingering shadow whispers from the edges of perception. Some echoes are too deep to silence completely, and the price of preventing future disasters may be more complex than you ever imagined. But even as reality stabilizes around your transformed choice, a lingering shadow whispers from the edges of perception. Some echoes are too deep to silence completely, and the price of preventing future disasters may be more complex than you ever imagined. The cycle breaks. Not with violence, not with the shattering crash you expected, but with something that feels like the world's largest held breath finally being released. Reality reshapes itself around your choice with gentle finality, and you find yourself standing once again on the streets of Bhopal, but not the Bhopal you remember from countless loops. This is a city transformed by the ripple effects of your decision. The Union Carbide plant still stands on the horizon, but its smokestacks emit nothing more dangerous than steam. The survivors you've watched die over and over again walk past you with faded scars that speak of suffering overcome rather than suffering eternal. Their eyes hold the weight of trauma, yes, but also the strength that comes from being heard, being believed, being helped. You feel it in your bones, the absence of that temporal pressure that has been your constant companion through countless December 2 and DS. Time moves forward now, linear and clean, carrying you toward December 3rd and beyond. The enhanced methyl isocyanate that once warped reality into repetitive nightmares has been neutralized by your choice to transform rather than escape, to teach rather than flee. But the lingering dread persists, doesn't it? Because deep down you know that some wounds never fully heal. On certain nights when the wind blows just right, you catch a faint chemical scent that makes your heart race with phantom memories. Sometimes, in the corner of your vision, you glimpse shadows that move independently of their sources. The rift hasn't been destroyed. It's been contained, held in check by your conscious decision to remember rather than forget, to take responsibility rather than claim innocence. The supernatural unease follows you like a faithful pet, a reminder that some prices are paid not once but continuously. You've become the guardian of prevention, the keeper of industrial conscience, and that role comes with psychological aftershocks that will ripple through your dreams for years to come. But you've also proven something extraordinary, that even eternal nightmares can fracture when faced with determination, courage, and the willingness to transform guilt into action. Let's recap this journey through alternate timeline horror, shall we? We started with the real 1984 Bhopal gas tragedy, where Union Carbide's criminal negligence killed thousands and poisoned generations. Then we asked the ultimate what-if question. What if the gas leak was forever? What if December 2nd, 1984 became a prison of repetition where you had to make impossible choices between personal escape and collective salvation? Through looped immersions and branching dilemmas, you faced corporate conspiracies, temporal rifts, and psychological horror that tested not just your survival instincts, but your fundamental beliefs about responsibility, redemption, and the true cost of industrial progress. In the end, you chose transformation over destruction, teaching over escape, proving that even in the darkest what-if scenarios, human resilience can reshape reality itself. The themes we explored: corporate accountability, survivor guilt, the weight of prevention, the power of choosing courage over compliance. These aren't just elements of supernatural fiction. They're reflections of ongoing struggles in our world, where industrial disasters still happen, where victims still fight for justice, where individuals still face moments when they must choose between personal safety and collective responsibility. If this time loop horror gripped you through every twisted turn and impossible choice, smash that like button to show your support for deep dive alternate history content. Subscribe to Midnight What Ifs for more supernatural twists on historical events. Imagine Chernobyl as an entity that feeds on radiation, or the Titanic trapped in an iceberg-time prison where passengers must solve the mystery of their own doom. Share this video with friends who love psychological dread mixed with historical depth, and comment below with the historical event you'd like to see us loop next. Would you choose the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, the Hindenburg disaster, the Black Death of medieval Europe? Thanks for joining us at Midnight What Ifs, where we prove that history's most terrifying question isn't what happened, but what if it never stopped happening? Remember, in a world where the past shapes the present and the present shapes the future, history's shadows might be watching back. So sleep tight, dream deep, and always remember, some loops are harder to break than others. Sweet dreams, or are they?